It's really amazing what can happen in a week. I mean, last time I recorded this was only 7 days ago, and my truck that night got down to, what was it, 4 degrees, I think? And then when I got to my my pickup location, it was 2. Right now, I'm in shorts and t-shirts. I mean, and it's not because I had the heater on either. Let me tell you, there's been a lot going on. So it's amazing because there's a lot going on, yet there's not a whole lot going on. As I think I said in the last video, I was told we don't have a job for you because basically once I dropped that off in Atlanta, they didn't have another job for me that would get me back in 2 days. Probably because of the weather, probably because it just, you're not going to send somebody out on a job. And also, technically, I guess we're still in a freight shortage. But anyway. So the next morning I got up, completely frozen, right here, under the covers and everything. I was just frozen. I mean, I am covering up. Sure, I'm covering up, but still, there's only so much you can do before it becomes ridiculous. So, I mean, I did, fine. I was layered up and stayed nice and warm as well as I could. And then I got up and I turn on the truck. If you want to prevent, you want to try to prevent the truck from seizing up, best way to do it is to turn on the heater for the fuel to start warming up. So as soon as I wake up in the morning, first thing I do is I turn the engine to on, not crank it, just on. So that way it can start to warm up the fuel and the oil. So that way if it's freezing, technically I think it's supposed to be if it's below like 10 under, or not 10 under, 10 over. So if it's like, what is that? Like 5 degrees, 7 degrees, something like that Celsius. Anyway, I've not had an issue with things freezing up yet. And I don't know if that's the reason why or not. That's a good practice to get into if it's freezing weather, is just turn it to on. That way it starts to warm itself up. You don't have to crank it, but, First thing in the morning, I get out of the covers. I don't want to. It's so cold. But yet I'm sleeping in my clothes in multiple layers, so, it's not overly bad, I guess. So anyway, I did my pre-trip. They always recommend that you do a little bit longer pre-trip, making sure you check every little bitty thing in colder weather. I knew that was my last day before I turned in the truck for a preventive maintenance, and I guess it's kind of like brushing your teeth for, and brushing and flossing, and people who just don't ever brush their teeth and don't ever floss, and then finally, like right before you go to the dentist, you're like, okay, well, I can make up for all of that for the past 6 months or whatever it is. You can't. So I looked at the truck and went underneath everything and really wanted to see if there was anything that I could mention to them. I wasn't trying to. I mean, I know that at this point, if I missed something, then I missed it. But I try not to miss things. I try to pay attention. But I wanted to be able to tell the maintenance department if I saw anything that was potentially wrong with the truck. That way, hopefully, they'd have a chance to fix it. Okay, so got it that morning, did my pre-trip, and I headed out. Now, I got to Johnson City probably about 5:40. And it's a you have to back in a long way, and it's completely black there. It's dark in the sky. They don't have any lights on that side of the building. So I pulled up and I looked down the way, and I'm like, all right, there is nothing there. I backed down there before. It's a long way. It's like 200 feet or something like that, maybe even longer. And so I look and I'm like, all right, they don't have any trucks. They don't have anything. They just have pods on one side, and then it's like a kind of goes to a little bit of a drop off, not like a steep drop off. It's like that, and then it goes into the trees, the bushes or whatever. So I'll go ahead and line up, and I straight back, and a couple of times, I get out and look, at one point, and I stop and pull forward because I don't trust my line, even though it was totally fine. I would rather be safe than sorry. I got all the way back there, and this is one of the things that was kind of interesting. Like I said, it was 2 degrees when I got there. I had my phone. I looked at it real quick. And I saw it was 2 degrees where I was. And I got out, the straps were frozen. That was something I haven't experienced before. So to me, I thought that was kind of interesting. These straps, where it goes up and over the pod, it was, when I was pulling it off, I was having a hard time pulling it down because it was like frozen in this position. So as soon as I use the winch bar and I break the straps, and it loosens up all this ice that had solidified around the whole thing, because I was driving in, freezing rain. Well, not really freezing rain. That's not exactly accurate. It was, it was cold, and I had ice, and that stuff that they put up on the road kick up and get all over everything, including my windows, which is not good. But windshield wipers constantly going until it stops working, and then you have to pull over and wipe it off. But anyway, so I got out and I broke all the straps, and I'm seeing chunks of ice fall off the winch, and pulling the straps over the top. That's when I was seeing that every little bitty thing, the half a twist you put in it, and the top, everything is coming off, and it's falling like this, and it's stiff chunks. So anyway, I wrap it up, break all that up, and I put all the straps away because I'm fully expecting to do my drop there, have to pick up in Knoxville, and then I am going to head to Atlanta. I broke all the straps. I'm ready for them to just take stuff off. The guy shows up a few minutes before 6. He's good. I've been able to pick up there before. He's good. He's got a good brain on him. He's also a CDL Class A driver. But he's really good there. And I had been texting him the day before. I think I mentioned this already. But I had been texting him and let him know that I was coming. And he's, just to confirm what they said in Atlanta. He's like, we're closed today. I'm like, oh, okay. He said he would be there the next morning, which was that morning, which is good. He showed up, and I greeted him, said hello, and said, I'm already unstrapped, ready to go. He's like, cool. He said, I hope, where are you going to after this? I know you're technically not supposed to tell anybody where you're going, but I didn't really see an issue in telling him because he's on the same account as me. And all he has to do is look at the trip sheet, and he knows where I'm going anyway. So I said, well, after I drop off here, I'm going to Knoxville and picking up. As soon as I said that, he starts shaking his head. And I look at him, and I'm like, after I pick up in Knoxville, going to Atlanta. He said, Knoxville's closed. It's going to be closed again today. I'm like, really? He said, yeah. And by then, I had already called Knoxville a couple of times because I wanted to see. I called them at 6. So he had gotten there, and I told him I was unstrapped and ready, and he goes ahead and gets the forklift and stuff. He came out with the forklift, and that's when I greeted him. And that's after he took my pods. He said, I hope you're not, that's when we had this conversation. And he said, what are you picking up in Knoxville? And I said, just 3 green tags. He said, well, I have green tags. I can give you those. I said, it's got to come from PODS. I said, it's got to come from PODS, and then Schneider has to approve it before I can do anything. And he's like, let me see what I can do. And I'm like, I still have to wait to hear it from Schneider. He's like, okay, all right. Anyway, what I didn't realize is that he went inside there and he shot him a message, and he sent it, and then he messages me because I contacted him the day before and told him, that's what I was saying, I'll be there soon. And he's like, we're closed. So he knew I was already there. So he messaged me and said, hey, I texted my, what do you call it? He didn't call it his dispatch. He called it, anyway, whatever their department is there. Slipped my mind. But he said he has contacted them and let them know the situation and that Knoxville is closed. And he offered that. And then I said, oh, okay, well, thanks. I need to wait till the DTL team gets in at 8 a.m. Eastern because they don't come in until 7 a.m. Central. And then God knows when they'll finally see my message. So that is probably the only, that's one of the worst things I should say about the PODS account, is that we work longer hours than our DTLs do. And that's annoying. So if we need something changed, they're not in early enough to actually make the change. So we end up sitting around waiting around. Or if we call in the phone system, we're sent automatically to after hours service. Even if we call during their office hours, if after hours, Schneider second shift or whatever they call it, they end up getting the message even when our people are logged in, our DTLs are logged in, and then we have to tell them, can you send a message or transfer me? And then they say, let me see if they're in. Oh yeah, they're in. Let me transfer you. It's annoying. Anyway, so I ended up calling sending messages to the DTL team and let them know the situation. Then I let them know that that this guy had offered me his green tags. And about half an hour later, he steps out and says, here's your new paperwork. And I said, what? And he says, yeah, they've approved you to get green tags from me, so I can go ahead and load you up. And I'm like, oh, green tags are empties, in case I haven't mentioned that before. And so if there's an abundance of empties, people love to get rid of them and send them to some other place in the country. And so he said, here's your paperwork, here's new, and so can I go ahead and load you up? And I'm like, let's hold on this just a little bit, just so I can talk to my DTL team. He just kind of gives me a smile. He's like, okay. He was nice about it. Then I look at the paperwork. It's the same trip sheet number. It's the same trip sheet. It still has dropping off in Atlanta. Everything is the exact same except the location and the container numbers. So I'm like, well, geez, PODS did make the change. So since they made the change, I should technically be good. So when he came back out, it was like 7:30, and he kind of says, you still waiting? I said, yeah, waiting until 8. And he said, would you like me to go ahead and load you now? Because this is your work. And I'm like, yeah, go ahead and load me. So I said, worst things at worst, if somehow he's mistaken or something, which I don't think he's going to, because he's not going to make the change and then tell me it's resolved just for me to be disappointed and say, I need you to take these back off. He's not going to do that. He's a good guy. I've been over there before. Anyway, so I went ahead and threw the straps, put them up there. Now they'd been starting to freeze in the box in the back too. So by the time I threw them, they were very very spirally. And I went ahead and secured everything, and then went and sat in the truck. I said, well, now I just got to get them on the phone before I can leave. In the meantime, as soon as 8 o'clock rolls around, I send them another message and said, hey, call me as soon as you can. And they don't do that, except very seldomly. And it's only when there's something urgent, like when I was like, should I go through the Chesapeake Bay Tunnel Bridge, which is a toll? They saw that message and was like, no! So they called me real fast on that one. But he also saw the message, but he had just gotten in, so I'm sure he was backed up. Anyway, I call the number. Schneider overnight support, it sends me to that queue, and then after a while I call again, and it finally puts me through, and I sit there on hold for 15 minutes. I'm like, I just get so frustrated because they don't answer their phones. Because they're probably overwhelmed with calls or overwhelmed with stuff when they first come in, but it's annoying. I don't want to sit there on the phone for an hour, because the way I look at that is right now, at that point in time, I was over 5 hours away from Atlanta. It was like almost 6, especially in those road conditions. And if I let it go past 9, my chances of dropping off in the Atlanta hub is 0 to none. And since I did not have another job, that was go home time. I looked at it and said, okay, if I sit around and wait for an okay thumbs up, then I'm going to be waiting forever. I'm going to be waiting until after it comes through. They've gotten on my case. They've gotten annoyed at me in the past because I haven't waited for their approval before I go ahead and hit a road. The way I look at this, though, is I said, it is coming from PODS. I double checked the trip sheet number. I checked everything. As far as I can tell, this is my work. Not Nashville. Knoxville is definitely closed. And the guy finally called me while I was waiting for Schneider, and he said, hey, yeah, we're closed. We're going to be closed today. We're going to try to come in sometime tomorrow afternoon. But he said, all of my guys, none of us could leave our house. They can't. He says, none of our guys can leave the house. He said, I think I might be able to later on today, but I don't know if I'd be able to actually get into the building. Anyway, I was like, okay, well, thank you. That was while I was still waiting to, determine if I was going to load up and have him load me up. Anyway, so the way I look at this is, since this is my work, it's already been confirmed by PODS themselves. They made the change. So the very least I could do is hit the road. And if I am contacted at some point and said, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I'm in trouble. I made a bad call. I look at it as, okay, if I need to take those back and drop them off, I'm not going to be able to go home Wednesday anyway at that point. So I took a risk and I went ahead and left. It was right before 10 when I was contacted with a call me. Actually, it was 9:34 on the tablet when I got the message. It pops up and just says, call me. I always hate those because then I can never get through the phone queue. I sit there on hold, I wait forever, and then finally someone picks up. So I said, okay. I pull off on the next exit and I make the phone call. Luckily, maybe it's because he was not on the phone when he said call me, and I was within one exit away from, or within 1 mile away from my exit. So as soon as I said I'm going to take the next exit. I pull off on the next exit, pull over onto the shoulder, which you're technically not supposed to, but it's on an exit in the middle of Tennessee where there's nobody because, there was very few people on the road since the whole state was frozen. And I call, and he's on a phone call, or not phone call, but they're talking in the background. He says, all right, so it looks like you already left. I'm like, yeah. I said, came directly from PODS, so I figured I was okay to hit the road. And he said, so what are you carrying? I said, I'm carrying 3 green tags from Johnson City, matching the new trip sheet. He said, okay, you're good. He said, and he says, let me just look at the trip sheet real quick. He says, it has you going, the new trip sheet has you going from Atlanta to Johnson City to Knoxville to Johnson City to Atlanta. And I jokingly say, well, from a pay perspective, I appreciate that. He says, are you going to Knoxville? I said, no, they're closed. He said, yeah, well, we got to update the trip sheet. He obviously didn't have a sense of humor about it. I knew he was going to change it anyway, so he didn't get the joke. He says, I'm not going to do that to PODS. I'm like, he seems to think I was serious. I know you can't do that. You got to match. You got to go Atlanta to Johnson City to Atlanta. I know that. He didn't get the joke. I guess he just didn't have a sense of humor because it's been crazy that morning. Anyway, so he says, so I'm going to get this changed, and I'll send you the new trip sheet. Look out for it. I'm like, okay. So they withdrew my work order. Luckily, I was already on my way to Atlanta. It routes me not down 81 or whatever it is, and then over on 24 rather, and then down to 75. I think part of the reason might be that there was some ice in Marietta on 75 South in Marietta, Georgia. So even when I double-checked the address, double-checked the directions in Waze was telling me, don't go that way. It says this. It said, when I was going out of Atlanta up there to Johnson City, it routed me up through the edge of Chattanooga and over. This time it was saying do the back roads, the same as what the GPS was. And I'm like, oh, okay, it must be because the road's closed and I'm not going to just jump off on it. It's probably bad. So I was like, all right, well, might as well just go the back road since it seems to think that would be like 250 some odd miles, and I could do that in 5 hours, which is technically accurate. If I do 50 miles an hour average, I should get to Atlanta by 2 or just after, so that I can still do the drop. Anyway, I drove start, stop on the back roads as I'm approaching Greenville, South Carolina. As soon as I get past Greenville, I'm smooth sailing straight down south on 85, 285 over. I arrive, I pull up in Atlanta. I drop off the PODS at like 2:15 is when I get there. So I jump in the line. I break all my straps, and I am just a happy camper. I'm waiting there, waiting for my turn. He comes up. I give him my paperwork. He pulls the PODS off. I go to Atlanta, and I check in with maintenance. He says, it's preventive maintenance. And I tell him also my heater's not been working. He says, okay. Anything we need to concentrate on the PM? And I said, no, there's like a leak in the power steering that showed up. It started trickling at one point because there was what looks like a little stream there, but it's not like pulling up, and it just ended somewhere on the hose. So I looked at it and I was like, I'm going to keep an eye on that. The next day it was worse, but it was dissipating on the hose. It wasn't going all the way down and pulling up or spilling. It wasn't actively going. So I said, okay, gonna keep an eye on it again. It never got worse. So, and it wasn't like coating the entire, it was originally just a little bitty, like what looked like a little drip. And then it went to like something about that big in size. And then it went down to, a little point. And then it never went down farther than that. So I said, I don't know what that's about, but I've been keeping an eye on it. And the clamp is tight. So it's not like it was loose. Because I check the clamps every day. I put my hand on them and just gently make sure that it's not loose, just by gently pressing it. But no, it was fine. And so I told him, I said, you might want to just check that just to make sure there's no leak. And if so, tighten or whatever. He said, okay. Anything else? I said, no. I told him about the heater at that point. He says, okay, we'll check it out. But it was 2 days until my PM started. PM was going to be on Saturday. Well, Saturday, and that was Wednesday. At that point, I go home. I go home the rest of Wednesday. I'm there Thursday, Friday. Saturday afternoon, I call maintenance and say, hey, I'm hitting the road again Monday. Just want to check on the status of my truck. They said PM was fine. Everything checked out fine. It looked great. I'm like, cool. Nothing really to report. He says, nope. I said, what about the heater? He said, well, our service techs turned it on twice for 1 hour and it got nice and toasty. I'm like, it's one of those things like, your computer doesn't work right. It's messing up all over the place. You call a computer tech and all of a sudden it works perfect. Same thing as a car mechanic. Your car acts up like crazy. You take it to the mechanic. It's like, what's the issue again? It's like, well, it's, and they're like, I can't detect anything. Same thing with the truck. So the heater was just like, oh no, it's going to be fine. It's going to heat up. So I asked him, I said, when I turned on, actually he asked me, truth be known. He says, so what is your procedure? What do you do when you want the heat? I said, well, I turn it on, I press the button in the middle, and then it says heater enabled. I have to press it a second time because the first one just makes the thing light up and the second one actually heater enable. And then from there, I arrow up until it gets to 76, 80, something like that. And I figure I can always back it off later, but that would at least, normally it's with plus or minus 5 degrees. If you set it, as a cooler to cool down, usually once it's like 5 degrees above, it'll normally say, okay, well, we're within 5 degrees and it'll stop there. Heater is about the same way. You have to set it for higher than you want it to go. And he said, yeah. He says, don't think of it as a thermostat. Think of it as how hard you want the heater to work. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. So I said, okay, so I guess that's if I wanted to work really hard and start pumping out heat, set it for what? He says, like 86 to 90. I'm like, oh, okay. Cool, no problem. He says, if it's too low and it hits that temperature and it feels like it hit that temperature, then it'll stop. And it may feel like it's within that temperature and not restart again, depending on what temperature you set. So if you set it for something like 72 or even 68, it may not ever turn on. And I was like, okay. He says, go check it. When you get the truck, check it out. And so I said, all right. Well, I went back. I sent a message to the DTL team and said, pre-assign me. They said, PODS does not pre-assign on the weekends. They will not pre-assign you until Monday morning. Great. So at this point, I'm like, well, I might as well sleep in my own bed again. And then wake up, and I took my kids to school, and then I just kept going. Got down to Schneider, put my stuff back in the truck, checked out the truck, made sure I got it, and it had been uncoupled from the trailer, so I connected it back up and everything, made sure everything was good there, no high hooks. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm good. So I went ahead and did my pre-trip and then jumped off the clock and sat there. This is yesterday now we're talking about, because I was home for 5 days. Well, technically 4 days and the day I went home. So Wednesday, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then I was on the road again. Then I was pre-assigned at 10:45 a.m. I look at it, it says starting in Atlanta, Georgia, ending in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. I was like, awesome. Pick up in Atlanta, drive up to Cinnaminson. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see how many stops there are. 4 stops. One of them is not Atlanta, so I don't go to the Atlanta hub. I go to Midway, Florida. And I pick up there. And that's 270 miles away. And it's not just down 85 or 75. You go down partway, and then you have to wiggle around on Georgia back roads, U.S. and state highways. If they hit 65 miles an hour, it's going to be for only a few miles. They're usually 55, sometimes they're 45 or slower. So I was like, great. 270 miles away. If I was going 65 miles an hour, I would get there in just over 4 hours. Being on Georgia back roads and stuff like that, I have zero chance of getting there by 3, considering it's almost 11 now. By the time I get out of Schneider and get on the interstates and stuff like that. Anyway, I wasted no time. I did not have an active fuel assignment. I was given one, but not when I left Johnson City. I was driving down the road, and it when they gave me when they removed my trip sheet, and then they gave me the new one. When I added it, it said, and it gave me a fuel assignment. But since I was in Johnson City the last time, it gave me a fuel assignment behind me about 200 miles in North Carolina. Not 200 miles, that's an exaggeration. But it had me going someplace in North Carolina. I went from Tennessee to South Carolina. Actually, I did cross through North Carolina a little bit, but by the time I got that message, I was actually just about to enter Georgia. I'm like, I'm not going to turn around and go back another 75, 80 miles, whatever it happened to be, 100 miles probably, to get to North Carolina. I'm not going to drive back and do that just to turn around for a fuel assignment. So at this point, I hit update fuel levels. After about 20 minutes, by this time I'm in Georgia, it says, they changed my active work assignment and they removed my fuel assignment. I'm like, okay. Technically, I was at like just under 3/4 of a tank. I'm like, I'm fine. I don't need to fuel up until after I get to Atlanta. Reason I'm mentioning this is because I got to 20 miles away from PODS Atlanta, and it decides to update and give me a fuel assignment back in Brazelton. Again, it's like 60 miles behind me. I'm like, why can't you give me a fuel assignment in front of me, or just say, yeah, you don't need one because you're 20 miles away at this point. So at this point, I hit the update fuel levels again because I'm like, there's no way in the world I'm going back for that. This time it doesn't remove it. So when I get to the PODS location, I'm like, I need you to remove it. So I hit it again right before I unstrapped. And by the time they pulled the straps off, it still had not removed. So at this point, I had to go in there and mark it as, no, I did not fuel up there. First time I've had to do that. Because normally if I hit update fuel levels, it disappears. Because it knows where I am. Now the new GPS system automatically, it does a geo check and it knows where you are. So it will automatically say, hey, you've arrived at the customer. And it automatically updates that in the work order. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is because I had, by the time I got the truck back, I had just under half a tank. And I start driving down the way the GPS is telling me to go, which is straight down 675 to 75 south, and then take back roads to Midway. Then all of a sudden, fuel assignment request, your worksheet has been updated. I'm like, okay, well, where is the fuel assignment? It ended up being that it wasn't on my path down 75 south. It wanted me to turn around and go back up, go over to 85, and then down to Noonan. At this point, I knew I had zero chance of making it to Midway. I'm like, you know what? Fine. I don't care. I knew I wasn't going to make it there anyway, so I turn around and I drive 10 miles back up 675. I get on 285. I get on 85 south, and I go to the fuel stop in Noonan, and I am annoyed. Because I really wish it would give you a fuel assignment on your path. It routed me. It was routing me out of the Atlanta Operations Center to Midway, down 75. Yet it gives me a fuel assignment. Why? Because my work order technically started in Atlanta at the other location. It started at the Atlanta PODS location, even though I was a BMT, so do not pick up there. Wasn't picking up. I was just going, it just starts you there because that's the last location, and then it sends you down from there. But because that was closer to 85, it put the fuel assignment there. So I should have gone in, and as soon as I hit the road, I should have marked Atlanta as complete. So annoyed. So annoying. Anyway, so I go ahead and I go around, go back over there. It takes me what? Probably 20 minutes out of my way by the time I went there and went around and then started doing the regular path that I would have done. It was 10 miles down and then it was 10 miles back up. There's my 20 minutes. Fueled up, went and did the back roads. And I thought about stopping at the, there was a Pilot and a Flying J at the Midway, Florida exit. And it was about 4:30 in the afternoon by the time I got down there. And I was like, now the trip sheet does have notes and said, we are quite often there after 3 o'clock. So call us and let us know if you can, if you would like to show up late. Well, I tried calling them, by the way. Didn't answer. So I was like, all right, whatever. So as I was driving toward the exit, I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead, and I don't want to stop at a, you know, I remembered when I was coming back from Paris, California, I think it was, maybe it was Texas at some point, I don't remember. But as soon as I went into Florida, I remember they had grapefruit juice, freshly squeezed, and freshly squeezed orange juice. I was like, you know what? That would be really nice if they happen to have it at this rest area. So I pulled off on the rest area, went ahead and did a post trip. I said, I'm going to stop here for the night. It was 2 miles away from my exit. And I went ahead and did the post trip and everything like that, only to find out they only had restrooms and vending machines there. So whatever. I still stayed there for the night. This morning, got up knowing full and well that I had already put in my ETA at 6 a.m. at that location. I got up. I did my pre-trip at 5:30. I headed out of there. I got there just before 6. And I back in under where it says that this awning. And I'm waiting. 6:15 rolls around. Another truck pulls up. And he pulls up and he's pulling in the other way. Well, actually, he pulled in the same way as me, except that I pulled forward and then backed in. He pulled straight in and then went down and looped around and came back. And we're waiting. PODS didn't show up there until 6:45. When he shows up there, he says, I saw that there was a ETA for 7 a.m. and there was one for 6:30. I'm like, well, I put one through at 6. He shook his head. Nope. And I'm not going to argue with the customer. I was like, that's weird. Because I had put in the ETA for 6 a.m. And he said, yeah, sorry, if I would have seen a ETA for 6 a.m., I would have been here. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you still showed up at 6:45 for a 6:30. He says he saw the 6:30 and he saw 7 o'clock. It's like, you were still late, but whatever. I was like, okay, well, either way, I'm ready. So he's like, okay, what are you picking up? And I said, just picking up. He says, you're picking up the 8-footer and the 2 red tags. I'm like, I am. He's like, okay, got you ready. He said, your red tags are over there, and then and I'll have you loaded up here in a couple minutes. So he did. I was out of there just after 7:15. Now, one thing I did not mention about this is the job says due in 2 days. At the time of this video, it is the 23rd of January. I was dispatched on the 22nd of January, and it's due on the 24th of January. 1,253 miles, point something. I was given an impossible dispatch I could not pick up in Midway same day. Otherwise, I would have continued to drive across 20. There is right at the border of not Jacksonville, Florida and Georgia. There is St. Mary and Kingsland, I think is the exit. And there are 2 Pilot Flying J's right there. And I would have loved nothing more than to get down there, get loaded up, and then to get out of Florida and right inside of Georgia. That way I could have hit the road early in the morning and gotten through most of 95. Would have put me in a better position. Instead, I was able to make it to Kenly, North Carolina, which is where I am right now. This is the first day I've ever driven where I have left when it was dark and I arrive at dark. It was technically not all the way dark. After about 20 minutes after, when I was done with my post trip, it was dark. I had a little bit of time left on my 11-hour clock, but I made great time. There was only, marginal slowdowns, where it drops down to 60 miles an hour for road construction. Most of the time it dropped down to 65, but a couple of times it drops down to 60. And there was only a couple of trucks that would decide to go really, really slow, and there's a whole long line on the left, and so I'm in the right lane. I get stuck behind him, and I slow down to like 45 or 50. I'm like, why are we going this slow? Because it is 66 degrees. It was 66 degrees in Florida. So I left 4 degrees, 6 degrees when I got there. It slowed down to 6. So it's lowered to 4. Then it was 2 degrees. Then all of a sudden it's like, 64 degrees, 62 degrees, depending on how you look at it, warmer. And, the account is long sleeves and long pants. So I'm always wearing those. Oh, sorry. But as soon as I land, I do my post trip here and get everything wrapped up for the day. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to take a shower. Because last night there are these, they're called Ignite, I believe. It's in a little black thing. It's like wet wipes, but there's, I think, 8 or 10 of them in there. I think it's 10. And they're like plush. They're ultra thick. They have a scent of something. Are they here? Let me see. Yeah. These things. These things are really good. Let me make sure I'm back in frame. I used that last night because there was no shower. And it says pomegranate infused scented cleansing cloths, energizing. They're called Ignite. And these things are thick. So they always say start at the top and work your way down. So you start with your face, then you armpits and arms and whatever you want to, crotch, legs, feet, whatever. Work your way down. I tell you, it was refreshing. Started with my face, which didn't get overly dirty, and I tell you, using it under the arms and stuff like that, and when you use it all the way over, it starts to feel you feel a lot very refreshed. I was surprised, quite surprised. But today, I was able to have my shower, so I changed into my shorts and t-shirt. And walk on across and get in the truck. I have not had to turn on the air conditioner or the heat. It's nice. I don't know what the temperature is in here right now. It's probably 60 something. I don't know. It might be closer to 70. I don't know. Because, body heat does warm things up. But anyway, so my fuel assignment that it gave me for this was in Kenly, so it's here. But when I pulled in here, it was like 6 p.m., something like that. And I did not want to miss out on a parking space. It ended up being fine. It ended up being that when I pulled in, I saw a bunch of trucks in the fuel island and then trucks behind them in line. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to sit in this traffic right now. I'm not going to sit and wait in line to get fuel. I'm going to go ahead and park. I'll get up in the morning and I'll drive over there and fuel up because at 4 a.m. there's not going to be anybody there. if I were to sit over there, it would have taken probably 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes for me to get through there. By the time I got my fuel and stuff, it would be it would have been half an hour easy. I don't want to do that. Then you still have to do your post-trip. Tomorrow morning I'll do my pre-trip, and then I will drive right over there and I'll fuel up. There's not going to be anybody in that line. I've been here early in the morning before. There's like maybe 2 trucks. But it will be totally fine for me to fuel up in the morning without a wait. I'd rather do that. Better utilization of time. But I have my ETA set for the red tags in the Cinnamon Sin location to drop them off at 1 p.m. And then the other location, which is like in the same parking lot practically, it's just in part of the same, it's like the other side of the property, at 2 o'clock. As long as I get it done before 3, I should be good. Hopefully I'll get pre-assigned tomorrow morning while I'm driving. The thing that's unfortunate to me is that I'm going to be leaving here. I'm going to get through the Richmond, Virginia area before traffic, before rush hour, which is going to be good. Because I do not like that area in traffic. Going around 295, people are there's always a collision. There's always something that slows things down. But that's going to put me right in Washington, D.C. at morning rush hour time. That's fun. One thing I will say is that it seems that traffic through Washington, D.C. area and Baltimore could be worse than it actually is. I say that, watch, it's going to jinx me tomorrow. But it could be worse. It's not terrible. It's not terrible. So we'll see what happens. That is what the game plan is. Oh, I did learn one other thing. Apparently, at some point in time, I had adjusted the thermostat on my refrigerator. I forgot it was there. It ends up being behind where I keep my yogurt. I keep my Hot Pockets in the freezer. I keep my yogurt on the top shelf over there. And at one point, I think it was the day of my last report here, I had eaten one of my yogurts, but the air had gotten so cold, and because the cooling unit in there was already turned to full blast, so it had actually started to make the yogurt a little frosty. It was kind of like, I don't want to call it a frozen yogurt. It's not ice cream like texture, but it actually had like little flakes of ice in it. It was actually really. It took the yogurt to the next level. It's probably not nearly as healthy if you do that, because it probably freezes the cultures or whatever. But I tell you, it was kind of nice having a little bit of a, it was a little thicker. It was kind of good. But having the refrigerator all the way on full blast, which I didn't realize, it only started doing this about maybe a month ago, last month I think it was. And I just said, oh, well, it must be just because it's cold. And at that point, I was like driving through the north and it was freezing. But it freezes. Like now it's not freezing because I took it out a little while ago. So it would, oh, geez, is it going to, oh no, look at that. It's not frozen as much anymore. It is sweating like crazy though. Oh, that I almost said the yogurt. The lotion on my fingers is making it slimy. But, oh, you can see at the bottom here how it bulged up because it froze. It's still frozen. I mean, it's frozen all the way up to the neck part here, and it's frozen to the core, so it's pressing out on the bottom. As soon as it thaws, it will come back in. It will start pulling back in. It's kind of interesting, though, in that sense, because I can't press it and have it go back in. The reason why that happened is because I was in a frozen area and it froze. I put water in there and it froze. So it pressed out on it. Now, if you notice, this thing is pretty, janky because, you see how this is just one of those simply orange or whatever, but it's more narrow on this side than it is on this side. It's like sticking out like crazy. The reason why it's pretty bad is because sometimes you go to these truck stops and their water doesn't work. You go over to the vending machine, you press the water button, it doesn't come out there either. And they don't have something like a Wendy's or something like that where you can go over and raid their water. No, it's you're at the mercy of filling up the thing with ice and then going over to the hot water dispenser and the coffee. That's what you have to do. Unfortunately, at the Kinley location, Flying J right here in Kinley, they do not have any working water at all. There's no working ice either, and their vending machine is completely down. So I went in there wanting to refill my water bottle, and it's completely out of water. They don't have water. Their vending machines aren't working and stuff. So I was like, well, I got to pull this thing out of the fridge, which is technically a freezer now. And when I pulled it out, I was like, is there a thermostat? I'm going to really look and see. And then I looked and I was like, it's behind the yogurt. I had never seen it, but apparently it had gotten brushed all the way up to max. So I turned it down a couple of notches. Anyway, I got to refill my water bottle out of that. And then refill that tomorrow, I guess. Whatever. Is what it is. It's not like this is a big deal. I'm just sharing because I'm sharing. I'm a sharing person. That's what I do, right? Anyway, here's hoping that I don't run into very much traffic in Washington, D.C. I don't get delayed and somehow stuck in Richmond. That I can make it through Washington, D.C. with very minimal traffic, that I can make it through Baltimore with very minimal traffic, and that I get to Cinnaminson, New Jersey and do my drop. I'm hoping for a pre-assignment sometime tomorrow. But you know what? If I don't have a pre-assignment, that means I'm going to hang out with my friend Sean. Sean is a audiobook narrator, and he is a computer programmer by day, and then by night and on the weekends and stuff like that, he does audiobook narrations and stuff. And he's done some, I've listened to some of his books. Good stuff. He's good. He's got a very pleasant voice. Not everybody who you listen to sounds pleasant over a long period of time. I don't know if you're like me, but I can be overly critical about sound. And it's funny for me to say that. But sometimes voices, people just they just annoy me. They're overly sibilant. They didn't choose a microphone the right way. Their way they speak is irritating or something like that. He's got a nice voice though. I can listen to Sean's audiobooks. He's got a good voice that I can listen to. So over Christmas, no. Yes, it was just before, it was over Christmas. I was given an Audible subscription for 3 months by my partner. So I was like, that's cool. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and do the 1 month free trial. So I did the 1 month free trial and then I added it. So that way I'm going to have it for 4 months. That's a better utilization of resources. So I do that. And I've been listening to audiobooks quite a bit in the truck driving. So it's nice. If you don't listen to audiobooks, you should. You should give it a try. It's nice. But anyway, so that's the latest. Yeah, that's it. I guess I'll have a report on how things go with my rush hour tomorrow and that kind of stuff, and then see where they send me off to next. Right now, America's starting to thaw. It's tonight it's not supposed to get down below 34 up in where I'm going in New Jersey. So, and then tomorrow it's not supposed to get down below, I think, like 52. Tomorrow night it's going to get down to, I think, 51, and it's going to be a high of 54 tomorrow. And then the next day it's going to be dropping down to a low of 39 and then a high of like 60 something by day. So 39 to 60 something, 64. So it's thawing. The west is starting to thaw too. So I've been looking at reports as I've been driving around and driving through frozen Tennessee, and people writing in some of the Schneider forums online saying, it's -20 where I am in Iowa, and -20 where I am in, Wyoming. -24 was the record that I saw. And I'm thinking to myself, if I would have been signed this stuff a week later, or if they would have sent me someplace like from Oregon, if they had sent me down to California and then back to Oregon and then across the state, I would have been right in the middle of it all. And at that point in time, my heater was not cooperating. I know what Schneider's maintenance department said. They couldn't find anything wrong with the heater. Okay, buddy. I turned it on and it seems to work now. I only turned it on for a few moments because it wasn't that cold. When I got back to the truck, it was a little cold, and I turned it on and said, oh, okay, it is heating up. So I went ahead and turned it off because I was going to jump out and couple the truck back with the trailer and that kind of thing. And then I did my pre-trip. And then by the time I got back in the truck, I was fine. Wasn't overly cold in Atlanta by that point. The bad weather had pretty much subsided. And it's we'll see what happens. So that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. Thanks for watching.